Hampton this time.
Is call to order the City of Mexico Beach Planning and Zoning Board on this Wednesday, September 7th, 2016. We'll start with a roll call, please.
Mr. Coakley. Here. Mr. Bush.
Here.
Mr. Kerrigan. Here. Chair Teal.
Here.
Ms. Kidder.
Here.
Mr. Driver. And Ms. Wilker.
4 out of 6 ain't bad.
Speaking of grandkids, that's where Mr. Driver is tonight. Going to get his first.
So we'll entertain a motion to accept the August 2, 2016 Planning and Zoning Board meeting notes.
I move to accept the minutes as they're written.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, now we're down to the meat. This says discussion/recommendation items, food trailers and trucks. I think at our last meeting, we kind of put to bed the food truck issue. I think we had a vote on it here, not to allow food trucks in the city of Mexico Beach.
I think that's correct, but I think Mr. Bush said that we need to regulate them a little
Yeah,
better.
I don't think that that should be, the end all. If the city has a special event that they want to allow a food truck in, they can make an exception basis for that.
Okay, so
And I don't know if you all got what I emailed out.
absolutely, good
Okay.
piece of work. We
But
appreciate it.
basically what I'm saying is mobile food trucks are generally not permitted to operate unless approved for special events by the vote of the city council. And then food trucks approved by special events are not governed by the ordinance that we're talking about here, but by ordinance 581. So if somebody wants to come in and the city sees a need for it, they can do it on an exception basis.
For example, an event at Parker Park. You're thinking maybe might be an
Or
occasion.
like the 4th of July run down here, if somebody wants to come in and sell drinks from a truck or something like that. I mean, anything that's special, it's out of the ordinary, where you can see a real use for a food truck that would not, go against what we talked about
And
last meeting would work out.
not necessarily have a lot of regulations, just leave it up to the discretion of the city government.
Well, they would have to fill out an application just like everybody else would.
Right.
And it would go for a vote
Go
before the
through
city
their
council. And then as long as they abide by all the regulations in 581, then I wouldn't see an issue with it.
And what we do now is that for one of the upcoming events, the Special Events Committee wanted, I think, a shaved ice trailer or truck to come in. And because that's a part of the event, then that's something we would allow just for the hours of that event. So we kind of allow them a little bit, but it's more of a food trailer, I think, than a food
So we
truck.
already have enough in place that we really don't have to, other than maybe overriding our previous vote if we choose to, come up with a lot of specific criteria for food trucks.
Well, right now, we don't have anything on the books that says a food truck has to be
Anything.
anything. So, where do you allow them? Do you want them only in a commercial area, things of that sort? No question, our current code does say when you get a business license, it's got to be in the commercial area. So that may be the way we regulate it.
Regulate that.
Somewhere, if you're not going to allow them except on a special basis, you have to put it in writing
Right.
in one of the ordinances. So
But
where
there's
do you put it?
already a procedure that they have to go through to do that.
Correct. The exception is special events. They kind
Right.
of rule their own little thing.
I read the various examples that you provided, and if I understand them correctly, most of these that you provided, they do allow food trucks, whether it's Pensacola, Fort Pierce, Alamorada, Jacksonville, numerous examples. However, they have specific requirements, regulations, not in residential areas, signage, etc.
So I
Right.
think maybe the easiest way to tackle this is, and the shorter of the two, is probably food trucks, rather than trying to put these two in the same package. And It sounds like several of you have criteria already outlined. So let's open food trucks, not food trailers, but food trucks, open to public discussion and see if there's anybody that would like to comment on food trucks being allowed with whatever we decide to recommend as the restrictions on them or the steps that they have to go through to be allowed to come, whether it be, and we may want to restrict it to special events as it already is, or if
In reading the minutes, you do know you passed a motion unanimously to not allow food trucks at all last meeting, right?
I just mentioned that,
And we would amend that motion.
Okay. Just making sure you...
so maybe I should start with that. Do I have a motion to, well, we don't know how everybody will vote on it.
You want to continue the public comment?
Yeah, let's go with the public comment. Is there any public comment on food trucks?
Let me just clarify, if I may, y'all are going to be talking strictly about food, not little retail trucks or anything like that, right? Just food?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
So are you saying that you've now decided no food trucks except for special events, right?
Well, that's the way it is now.
Right.
We haven't put together our criteria to recommend yet. That's why I'm looking for public comment. There may be some people who say, why is it just for special events? There might be other people that say, oh, it should only be for special events. So that's the reason I'm opening it to public comment first before we go into our discussion.
Okay. I think it should just be for special events.
Okay.
If
Yes,
they're
sir.
licensed through the state of Florida, they're inspected. They have everything that they need to produce their food and stuff out. So they are inspected. They have a certain place they have to be inspected and everything. So if they're inspected and they pass their inspections, if a food truck is fully self-contained, it has its holding tanks, its grease tanks, it has everything, then they would have to move to dump their gray water and everything. Or either they could hook up to city sewer with a grease trap. That takes care of your grease and everything. They have to have a place to take the grease trap and dump the grease out of their grease trap and everything to keep it from going into the sewer.
Okay. I would, and you may know a lot more about it than I do, I thought what a food truck would be is a mobile vehicle that isn't required to hook in as a food trailer is to any city services, that there's, like you say, they're self-contained. They can leave the city. We don't have to provide, I don't think we should have to provide them a place to dump their grease or their gray water or whatever you call it. I think what I'm envisioning is if we agree that we should allow them either for special events or any occasion, that they be self-contained, mobile, meet whatever criteria we come up with, and then go away. They can't, I don't think they should be allowed to stay overnight well, I say that, but what if you have a 2 or 3 day thing?
They're gonna need to go back to their base and replenish. Anyway, they should go back, because they're gonna go come from Panama City or Tallahassee.
Right.
I mean, there aren't any here, so I would figure they would go back, take care of all that stuff, restock, come back, spend their 8 hours here or whatever. They should be totally self-contained.
I know in the history, there have been a few, maybe 2 that I can think of, local attempts to have a food truck. And I guess they met their demise because they weren't profitable enough and they ceased to exist. Which kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying. They're going to come out of Panama City, or maybe a local might have one who only brings it out. Let's say we do restrict it to special events, brings it out just for that. So I think the criteria needs to be set forth that they meet all of the current regulations and anything else that we want to add to them as a recommendation to the council.
I would disagree. I think that after having read 581 and leaving it up to the council, that covers everything. We don't need to tell the council what they need to do for a special event. They should be able to decide what exactly it is they're looking for. And if they don't like what that application says, they don't grant it.
Well,
That gives them some leeway.
And that's what I said initially. I think we already have enough in place to regulate if we all agree that they should only be here for special events. It sounds like we have enough in place for not having to establish a whole bunch of new criteria.
Right. I think I'd be comfortable with what we're trying to say is that we're okay with food trucks when they're here for special events run by the special events committee. Anything other than that would need to have approval by the city council. Is that what you were trying to get at?
So, well, let me understand this. If there's a special event, a food truck can come to the city administrative building and make application and not have to be approved by the council. Is that correct? Or do they have to make application far enough in advance because it will be presented to the city council?
Well, right now, the special events is kind of covered for licensing. So right now, they make the application to the special events committee, and then we recognize them automatically. In other words, we don't make them pay a special fee or inspection or anything, you know.
Is there anything there that tells them that we designate where they can park?
The only things it says is had got to be in a commercial area, tourist commercial, things of that sort. Can't be in residential areas. And that's pretty much on par with what we do anyway.
Well, the special events committee would tell them where to park. where the
That's
event is.
correct.
My next way, what is the zoning on Parker Park? Is that commercial such that you could have, no, you should, okay, never mind.
Let's ignore that.
Yeah.
Gets into the-
Special event is a special event, so that's sort of.
I mean, it could be that if there were an event at Parker Park, depending on the parking situation, the committee could allow them to park across the street there in the park next to the El Governor, which is currently where most of those kinds of events are held. That, I'm almost positive, is zoned appropriately.
Well, the hope is once Parker Park is finished, that most of the events would be held there, so it'd be well out of the traffic areas and the hazards we now have with Sunset Park.
I mean, I haven't seen a rendering to know how big Parker Park's gonna be and how much actual parking on the park is gonna be. But that would be something the committee could, like you say, if they're gonna look at what's happening and
Right, the current plan calls for about 55 parking spaces within the park. But as things grow event-wise, they may need that space for the event itself if it keeps growing.
So we're
Leaps and
not
bounds.
solving the parking problem by opening.
Parking is always a problem in Mexico Beach.
Again, I would say, leave that up to the committee. It's their event. They should determine
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
what's going on.
Right.
So are we saying we don't really want to take any action or recommendation, or do we want to make a recommendation that we believe there's enough already in place that we agree with to allow food trucks under the current provisions?
For special events.
In writing, yes. Somewhere in writing in the LDR. an ordinance.
I have a question.
Yes.
Last month, when y'all decided that you didn't want food trucks, your point was that it was a circus atmosphere, your words, Joe, that it was a danger when you put them on 98 because we have no room really to put them, and that if they could be allowed in commercial areas, we started looking at all of the commercial areas on 98 where they could potentially go. And the unanimous consensus at that time was, not a good idea, no food trucks. So now you're coming back and saying, let's allow them for special events.
That's what I'm
Hopefully
hearing.
they will go to Parker Park.
Well, they'll go wherever the
special event is
special
being
events
held,
committee
okay?
wherever the special event committee tells them they can park.
Okay, think about this. If you have a special event, are you considering fishing tournaments special events? Going to park them down there now? Or is it just going to be the events that are held by the special events organization? I mean, you're still opening up the can of worms of they could go anywhere on 98 with all the pedestrians crossing back and forth. So saying that there is enough in place already and leave it up to special events committees or the council to do seems to me like a very wide open and dangerous proposition.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my short-sightedness at the last meeting was the reason I made the motion not to allow them. Having thought about it for a while, there may be a need, and apparently there has been in the past, to have them allowed. And I think we can generally cover everything if we just massage what I wrote earlier. Mobile food trucks are generally not permitted to operate unless approved for special events sponsored by the Special Events Committee. So only the Special Events Committee would approve it, and they would determine exactly what the situation was and where they should go.
And in my case, last time I listened to all the reasons against, and traffic dangers would certainly be good reasons, but I think one of the reasons for this workshop was to look at what others have done and look at other examples, and that's what I read here. And I see things like Islamorada mobile food vending has become a nationwide phenomenon, and there's been an express interest in such services. I think this one is Fort Pierce wishes to expand these types of sales to include mobile vending to benefit its residents. So other communities are also looking at benefits. I just wanted to look at both sides of the equation. I can tell you, in my business, I don't know anything about the operations side of food, but we do event marketing for clients. And they quite often recommend food trucks. If we're doing an event in Dothan, Alabama or somewhere, they'll ask, is there a popular local food truck? Food trucks aren't what they used to be, I can tell you that. They might have in the past been a truck that pulls up to a construction site. Now they're in demand, and I asked the young people in my office today, do you guys like food trucks? Yes. I'm not for or against here. I'm trying to make sure we understand what food trucks are and how they might benefit
An
a
event.
special event.
It's going to be difficult to put a motion together for this.
Hey, I recommend, make a motion.
All right.
We recommend to the city council that they disregard our previous motion, and we now believe that we should allow food trucks only for special events sponsored by the Mexico Beach Special Events Committee.
Now, the city doesn't have a special events committee.
Okay, what is this, who makes up the Special Events Committee?
Tourist development.
It's not part of the city.
Adrian, I'm on special events committee. It's a committee of us.
It's not a-
Started out with the CDC, and now we've separated, and we have our own
They're their own.
special
It
events.
is a 501c3.
Yeah. They're their own, they're not part of the
It's
city.
not part of the city.
Do you have to go to the city for approval of what you want to do?
Well,
Just
we
like
did
everybody
on this market day coming up through Mel because the guy wanted to come in with the snow cones. Little
Okay,
snow cones,
let's take the concerts in the park issue.
Uh-huh.
Okay, if you decide you want to do the concert in the park, do you have to go to the city to allow you to do that?
That's
That's a
CDC.
CDC.
We only do gumbo, art and wine, the market days, and 4th of July race.
Coordinated by the Special Events Committee through the CDC?
Through
No.
themselves.
Nope,
Coordinated by the Special Events Committee.
through special
Period.
events committee.
But who does the special events committee, you have
You're
to
saying
answer
you don't
to the
report to
city.
anybody.
Themselves.
You
They
can't-
do not answer to the city.
So you could bring in Barnum and Bailey Circus and nobody can say anything about it?
That's right.
Cool.
Well, no, because we would still have to go by.
You'd have to get permitted.
We don't have a big enough parking lot.
How about special events approved by the CDC?
Well, we do have a special
We
events
can't tell
form
the
that they have to
Special
fill
Event
out.
Committee who to report to.
What was that, Mel?
We have a special events form that every organization has to fill out to use Sunset Park, Under the Palms Park, or future Parker Park, things of that sort, and they all do. And by doing that, that just establishes a contact person, also that whether you're going to need police officers to help direct traffic, like they do across 98, for those things on Sunset Park. So we do have that little form to fill out. But when it comes to the city wanting to actually register food trucks for special events, I'd rather not putz with it.
I mean, it sounds to me like the city needs some oversight over special events, and they don't have it right now.
We have nothing to do with
Let me
them.
ask the Special Event Committee people, do you think that there are special events that you all coordinate that would benefit from the use of food trucks?
Yes, like when we have market days, a lot of people start complaining that there's no food there, they don't have anything to eat, and they start leaving. Like we've started now having live music, but people don't want to stay because we're hungry.
So generally speaking, the Special Events Committee, or at least these two representatives,
Uh-huh.
would be in favor of having some say-so for their events, whether to allow or not allow food trucks depending on the event. I mean, what if you have a 5K run and Special Events Committee handle those? So all of a sudden down at the corner of 386 and 98,
Well, wait a minute, Joe, we only have the one a year, that's the 4th of July one.
okay.
See, things like the turkey trot or the beach
Oh, that's
triathlon,
private.
that's not special events. CDC helps with the beach triathlon, biathlon. Turkey trot is its own organization.
And the vision.
So you all are basically only in the 4 or so events a year.
Special events started out as its own 501c3 formed solely to earn money for the July 4th fireworks. That's the origin of it. It was never actually part of the CDC. It worked in tandem with CDC for a while. Then this year, the CDC decided it didn't want to be bothered with all of that anymore because it became so entwined, and it's completely separated again. So you've got special events, CDC.
But there are other major activities that take place through the year that aren't defined as special events.
Right, like a fishing tournament.
Like a
all
fishing
those are
tournament.
private.
So we're
That's
gonna,
what I'm getting to.
yeah. So
Like the Kingfish tournament, it's not a city-sponsored
Right.
tournament.
And I would assume Marquardt's might like a food truck there.
MBARA is the one
Or
that does
MBA,
that.
yeah, the association. And I think what we're finding out in this discussion is, and it's kind of as Lisa said, if you just say the special event committee can apply for these food trucks to come, then what about the MBRA? What about another 5K sponsored run that doesn't have anything to do?
Okay, then you go back and put the approval upon the city council.
You couldn't just say the Mexico Beach special event.
So, but if you put it on the city council, someone would have to make application, or do you mean to make the decision or to approve on an event by event?
To make the decision on whether the food truck can be there or not.
And the city council generally meets once a month?
Which would require them to do some prior planning.
We have one voting meeting a month. We have a workshop a month and a pre-agenda meeting a month.
And only at the voting meeting would this be able to be approved?
Well, we've kind of been voting at all of the above meetings occasionally.
I can just, I foresee that, and maybe it's not too restrictive, but if I'm a food truck and I'm out of Panama City or anywhere else, and I want to apply to have my food truck at any event, special event, or any other event, that's a lot of, I guess it's up to the vendor, but you know, if you're gonna have to apply in time to make a meeting so that the council can make that decision.
Could we perhaps, the form that's filled out for the use of any of our facilities is just a one-page simple form. There was a discussion by our city council maybe a month or two ago that some of the events that are in Mexico Beach don't really make the application, like the Gollywhopper tournament. It just happens. And so there was a discussion that perhaps we should make them fill out the form because they eventually use our police forces to direct traffic, and so they should pay accordingly. And I think the audience was overwhelmingly in favor of that because it's a drain on our resources. So, in other words, the event pays for itself. So could we say that maybe if we don't want to say allow the special events, maybe say city-approved events? In other words, if we...
Are special events also city-approved events?
Only insofar as that one-page form filled out with the contact information and the need for police department. In other words, we don't...
There are
we
no
don't-
city-sponsored events.
Yeah, we don't micromanage where they're going to put stuff or when they're going to have it, things of that sort.
But there are a lot of events, not a lot, but there are some events outside of the Special Events Committee. So somehow, somebody's gonna have to figure out how to wrap all this in to see if we want to, what we want to recommend.
Then you also get into the discussion of what we recommend. Do we recommend that everyone does it, or do we pick and choose and then you open another can of worms? You're gonna pick and choose?
Pick and choose what?
Pick and choose who gets to have a food truck.
What type of event?
Well, that's the city, it's left up to the city, the council to decide.
It sounds like if there's an event happening and you've got a form that people have to fill out because they're going to use the police, and any event happening in the city, the police need to know about it. They need to watch out for traffic because we only have one road coming through here. Couldn't we just add to the form on there? So basically, everybody who's having an event should come to you and fill out the form, and then put on there a thing: Are you going to have any food trucks? And if so, where are you going to park them?
Well, I would say, and if so,
Something like that.
then you must be guided by the attached guidelines, and they can download those or see those and sign those and submit those. I can't really see someone needing to come to Panama City and sit in one of these chairs a month and a half in advance that could be.
Fill out the application. It's
That's
a
kind of what
simple
I'm
process.
Could we treat them using the peddler's license? The 3-day peddler's license?
That's what I thought, the last time we talked about food trucks, I think I brought that up. Isn't the peddlers, don't they come under, they're gonna come in, be here for a little while and leave? Isn't that what the peddler's license is for?
If it was the food truck just by itself, but we allow the special events committee to kind of do their own thing.
But so any of those other events outside of the special events committee, say some fishing tournament, if they want a food truck in here, that should fall under the peddlers. Shouldn't it?
However we want to construct it, but to make it even more difficult, like the Gully Whopper tournament is based mainly by the CDC Welcome Center, but the NBARA Kingfish is at the marina, which is not owned by the city. So no matter where we go, it's muddy, you know.
Whatever event you're talking about, whether it be a run, whether it be the Kingfish tournament, whether it be anything else, is a special event. It is not normal. So everything falls under special events, not the special events committee. So I think it's very easy to
Yeah,
word
it
and
could
to
be
say
phrased that way.
applies under 581. It's very simple. I mean, there's no sense in making it more complicated than it is.
Ooh, I agree with that.
But it would be good to have some regulations in place, if they are allowed under that special event, so that they understand that here's where.
Can't just pull over
where
on
you
the
park
side of
and
98 and
So
open
many of
the
these are already
door.
established, it would be very easy to pick and choose the best of these and put them on the website and have that as a form and an application that they can complete in advance.
So I think what you're saying is we do need to come up with a little bit of criteria.
I think it exists, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It already exists. You read 581?
Yeah. With the can't interfere at the intersection, yeah.
So if 581 governs, what more do we need?
So do we want to try again to make a motion? We were in the middle of one.
Was this 581?
That came from 581. Okay. Not verbatim. I make a motion that we recommend to the city council that mobile food trucks are generally not permitted to operate unless approved by application for special events and approved by vote of the city council. So they have to make an application for the food truck to the city council only for special events. And you can massage that however you want.
Okay. Let's
Oh, and, excuse me.
hold up to 581.
Food trucks are not governed by this ordinance, whatever we're working on, but by Mexico City Beach. Excuse me, Mexico City Beach Ordinance 581. So that's included in there.
I'd like to question that, and maybe this is sort of directed to you, Mel. Is there a way to take the city council needing to approve it each time out of the picture by having them follow these set of rules?
At the current time, all the applications for special events does not go to the city council.
I think that's very cumbersome to have to do. Is there a way that you might, unless you disagree, is there a way that you might like to rephrase that to let it fall under the current application and 581 restrictions without putting it in front of the city council?
Who approves the events, if not the city council?
Code enforcer.
You.
Code enforcement officer and me.
Okay, upon application by to the code enforcement officer and the city administrator.
In deleting the
City council?
city council.
Does anybody in the audience have a problem with that?
No, just a heads up, you might want to make sure that the code enforcement will remain full-time because the mayor announced last night that the 2 police officers who have been our code enforcement are now being absorbed back into the police department, and they are advertising for a civilian code enforcement, and it will go back under mail instead of under the city police department. However, none of that has been ratified by the council, so that was just an announcement. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, so amend what I told you then, Adrian, and just approved by the code enforcement officer and the city administrator.
And in lieu of, well, I would assume we'll have a code enforcement officer soon.
Whether they remain full-time or part-time, we'll still have a code enforcement officer. But something we might want to consider, in light of the fact the police department is involved most of the time, should we make the form such that it's got to be signed by the administrator and the police chief?
And I would think that along with code enforcement, the police chief would have a lot to say about where they can and can't park.
If we do that, aren't we changing the process that's currently in place?
No.
Because the police chief doesn't approve stuff now, does it?
The police chief does not. But that's something we can take care of internally. It's really not a subject for...
Yeah, it's not something that has to go into
Right.
our recommendation. So, is it possible, Adrian, to reread the motion that
Very disjointed
is on the
motion.
floor?
Well, you could have it to where it's signed by the city administrator, and that way, whether they have a code enforcement signing it or the police chief, you know, I'd be the last one to sign it.
Would you like that included in your motion?
I think I directed him to change the
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
Motion by Mr. Bush, seconded by Blank at the moment, to recommend to the council that food trucks only be allowed during a special event with proper event approval from the city administrator, police chief, and code enforcement officer, with event regulation falling under Mexico Beach Ordinance 581.
Are you happy?
Sounds
with
good
that?
to me.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Shall we do a roll call vote
Sure. Give me 1 second.
as soon as Adrian's ready?
Mr. Coakley?
Yes.
Ms. Kidder?
Yes.
Chair Teal?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Yes.
So moved. Okay, here's the other half. Food trailers. Let's start with any citizen comment on food trailers.
Happy with the ones that are here and don't want to lose.
Excuse me?
We're happy with the ones that are already here and don't want to lose them.
And it's my understanding that if they're either here or they aren't, if, depending how we recommend and depending how the council votes, we either open the door for more under whatever guidelines and restrictions come up. Because if we don't allow them when their year is up, then they have to go away. Is that correct?
That makes sense because you have to buy an annual business license, and October 1 is,
They're due, so if anybody...
they're due.
And if it was the council's decision not to allow them, then you couldn't just allow the existing ones to reapply and stay. Is that correct?
Well, it would make sense that they would have the rest of that particular year before their license would
If
get
all this
renewed.
were done by October 1st, we don't
Right, we're not gonna get this done by October 1, so they've
Yeah.
got another year anyway.
But if, let's say it was voted on after they had made their application for next year, but let's say that the end result was that we don't want to allow food trailers in Mexico Beach, then at the end of that year, they would have to go away.
I think makes sense.
Okay. Now, I think it was the general consensus of the committee, of the board here, that we want to allow them. When we last met, most people were in favor of that. And I think what the agenda is then tonight is if we're going to allow them, to give some guidelines and recommendations to the council that we feel should be considered for any existing or future food trailers. So, once again, I'll turn to you because you had a very nice package you put together, and we appreciate it. And you had a lot of good ideas, and then any other ideas that any of the board members have about it.
How about this idea, Joe? Let me go through and read what I've got, and then we'll discuss each item. And if you found something else in your packet you think it needs to go in there, or you would like to discuss what I've got, I can basically justify everything I've got in here. We can talk about each one as we go down, and then just pass, I guess, Adrian, this on to the council, saying this is what we sat down, talked about, and these are the general guidelines we feel should be followed.
Should be included in
Whatever the ordinance is.
any regulation if they so choose to allow them.
How does that sound? Let's do it that way. Okay, first of all, I basically, somewhere in there we need to say, this applies to all food vendors not operating from the structure permanently affixed to the property on which it is located, which covers trucks and trailers. Because we're going to mention trucks in here later on.
But we put trucks to bed.
But we're going to mention trucks in here later on too.
So let's
But the things that you feel about trucks should have been in the previous motion.
I thought we've talked about food trucks, we're talking about semi-permanent
Food
trailers now, such as.
That's what that's what we're going to get to.
Yeah.
Can we not include food trucks then in your
We can.
outline?
We
Because
can.
we've already voted about food
Are you
trucks.
saying this is what you're going to send to city council? We've already decided what we're going to send to them about.
Okay, when I get down to licensing and permits,
Okay.
okay. What I say is licensing permits general, every food vendor must have a mobile food vendor permit issued by the city, meet all state licensing requirements, carry whatever X numbers of liability insurance is determined is required, meet health and safety requirements, and have a permit issued by the city. Okay, then I go on to say permits. Okay, mobile food trucks are generally not allowed except for special events, blah, 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 blah. If they are permitted, then they fall under Ordinance 581. Concession trailers may apply for a city permit, and then we lay out how they apply. So we're saying right here in black and white so they can read it. If they're a mobile food vendor, they can read right here in this regulation. Because this is a mobile food vending ordinance. They read right here. They don't have to go somewhere else to see they're not permitted. But if they want to come, it tells them how to do it. That's why I mentioned both of them.
All right.
Okay, definitions. I really only see the need for a couple definitions. There may be need for more based on what you guys think, okay? Food vendor, 1. Any business that sells edible goods. This term applies but is not limited to, okay, food vendors. 1, mobile food truck. A self-contained motorized vehicle unit that can change location under its own power. We've already talked about that. 2, concession trailer. A mobile vending unit not permanently attached to the ground but has no power to move on its own.
That has what, excuse me?
No power to move on its own. Okay. Edible goods. Items for sale that are eaten by the buyer. This includes prepackaged food, prepared food, on-site prepared food, and raw fruits and vegetables. Now, raw fruits and vegetables begs the question, how about roadside food stands or vegetable stands? Is there anything we need to address there?
No, they're separate from trailers
Okay.
and trucks. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to check.
Let me ask this. I'm a food trader. I guess I could choose to give away koozies with the drink. but not allowed to sell them.
And that, yeah, we address that further on.
Okay.
Discussion.
I don't have any problem with what you presented so far.
Okay, other definitions that we think may be necessary.
Question. So you're talking food trucks and food trailers. What I'm envisioning, somebody could, instead of rolling in a food truck, they could have a food trailer that is a mobile, like a truck. They bring it in, set it up for the day, and then they leave.
Then it's not.
Then
a
we
food
have
No, because when
semi-permanent,
you
which is
read, when
what
you
we're
read the requirements further down for location and for operating requirements, it spells out what needs to be done, and somebody that's movable can't do that.
Okay, so you are talking about semi-permanent,
Yes,
like Mr. G's.
Yes.
That's what
Yeah,
they're
not us.
talking about, yeah.
and like Subies too, because they're hooked up
Yeah.
to sewer and water.
Yeah.
Okay. More definitions. Okay, licensing and permits, I'll read it again. Every food vendor must have a mobile food vendor permit issued by the city, meet all state licensing requirements, carry whatever amount of money liability insurance is determined, and then meet health and safety and sanitation requirements. Is there anything else that they should have to have in order to operate in Mexico Beach?
Other than, no, but we're gonna go on to talk about locations and restrictions and zoning.
That will come
This
under.
is just to get in the door.
This is just how to go about getting permitted.
All right.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add.
Occupational license.
Occupational.
A business tax, yeah.
Can add that. Thank you. So we're talking 5 items now? Adrian, it's 5?
Business tax, permit, state licensing, liability, health, yeah.
Okay.
I'm changing it here because whatever you decide here, this is the format I'm going to send to the council.
Okay.
So I'm changing everything through this.
Okay, no problem. Okay, then permit, we've already gone over.
I reworded that too.
Yeah, basically what we said earlier. Okay, then concession trailers may apply for a city permit as follows. And then we lay out the application process. We should not determine that, the city should do that. The approval process, again, that should be left up to the city. Denial, what happens if one's denied, and then give them their course of action should they have to appeal. And I think that's something that the city itself should develop. And then second issue under licensing and permits would be revocation and suspension. And again, that's something the city would have to develop on its own. I don't think that's our business discussion. Okay, next item, location. Okay, now these are just bullets. Limited to conducting business in areas zoned general commercial or tourist commercial. Written permission of property owner required, whether it be he allowing them to do it or if he is leasing that to them, that's written permission. May not operate with 100 foot of existing restaurants, cafes, or other food-related establishments. Discussion. May not block or interfere with all required public parking spaces, building access, loading zones, or landscape associated with the property owner's or adjacent property owner's principal use. So if you're leasing property to somebody for a food trailer, he cannot interfere with your business or what your neighbor's business is.
If you have written permission, it should be up to the homeowner or the owner of the business to decide that, shouldn't it?
Yes, and that's what it's saying. Not, he'll determine what bothers him, but how about if it bothers, take for instance, Mr. G's is on two vacant lots. Suppose his business encroaches on Gulf Foods and that whole block in there. I don't think it should be allowed to.
But it says it also can't with the property owner's access.
But the property owner will determine what that is.
Am I misreading this?
I've got a gray area going on too here.
Okay,
Are you, let's
okay, I see what you're saying.
Let's say
I see what you're
we're on
saying.
a strip of 98 and we have a residence who is on a lot that is zoned tourist commercial. And they have a huge front yard. But let's say there's residential, let's say there's 3 in a row, and the middle one decides, I'm gonna make a little money, I'll let this guy put his food trailer in my front yard. And it met whatever other criteria we discussed, but let's say that neighbor A and neighbor C say, oh, no. Is that what you're approaching?
No, what I'm saying, as long as it doesn't interfere with the principal use of their property, which is a residence. So they can't block their driveways, they can't encroach on his property. His principal use is residential.
But they could now have a beach house on US 98 whose neighbor has a food truck in the front, or food trailer on their property.
Okay.
Whoa. I know how
Do
I might feel
you
about
actually
it.
think that that would be approved?
Who knows?
How could you disapprove it? If you don't write into the rule that somehow there has to be consideration for the adjacent properties.
Or you could argue principal use would be interference with their environment. I mean, I don't know.
I
think that's unrealistic to expect that to happen.
Don't we have that now, though? I mean, don't we have residences next door to restaurants all over Mexico Beach because of the nature of
different situation, and my view of it is that A and C bought their beach houses. B has a beach house that has a big enough yard to accommodate a food trailer. Now, do you think it's right for A and C to now have to have a food trailer stationed in the front yard of their neighbor?
Our LDR does allow residential uses in commercial property. So perhaps we could word this so that it says that the trailers cannot be
Adjacent to residential.
well,
Or-
we're going to allow it in commercial and tourist commercial and commercial anyway, but if the principal use is residential in nature, then they wouldn't be allowed.
We have a comment.
I was gonna say, Jim, would a buffer accomplish what you were all looking for? I know you said 100 feet
Yeah.
from adjacent property, but if you all just established a buffer of what you thought would be an acceptable distance from, so, you're talking about residential next to commercial. If you're talking about tourist commercial or general commercial, this being a permissible use, that you all could establish a buffer, be it 2, 3, 4, 500, so that if there was a residential in the vicinity, it's a 500-foot buffer, so that you're pushing these people, you're pushing this permitted use away from any potential residential use.
I think there
That's a
needs to
good
be
idea.
some protection put in place for, I'm telling you,
Could you not also include that they would have to receive permission from the adjacent residents?
we can put anything in there we want, but
Let me suggest, it would be much easier to visualize all of this if y'all were looking at the current zoning map right there. So you can see, for instance, this lady sitting right here, her house, which is at the end of 15th Street on 98, is commercial property. The old Parker Place is commercial property.
I just happen to have it.
There you go. Okay, start
And-
looking at
and
this
it's-
in real terms.
It's exactly why I just brought up what I brought up, is I would suspect that there are several locations up and down our cities where either the zoning changes from one lot to another, or there are residents that can be impacted by the adjacent lot, even if house A, B, and C are all on an allowable zone, It doesn't mean, to me, that you should be able to plop a food trailer down between two people's houses just because it's zoned that way.
Exactly, think of the driftwood. On this side of the highway, there's another. I mean, y'all need to look at real faces and real places here to look at this.
I think that can be addressed by that suggestion right there with a buffer zone between the closest residential.
Because you already said 100 feet of business established, if you're using this wording here. Restaurants, cafes, other food structures, or a private residence. Just put that within the 100-foot buffer, whatever.
And then when someone comes to you, or to the council, or to the city with an application and they say, however, there's a residence right there, you have to have a 100-foot buffer. Well, no, I have a letter from those people that say it's okay to put it there. You know,
Think of
we're
the-
treading on some dangerous ground here, in my
Most
opinion.
of these lots are 50 feet. So that's at least 2 houses away, right there. You want to put it on somebody's lot right here, well, it can't be within 100 feet of such and such, or you need a 100-foot buffer. Well, you can't do that because that's 2 more houses that you gotta find some way to get around. I mean, y'all are opening a can of worms that's gonna fall everywhere.
Why would the 100, I don't understand what you're saying, why the 100-foot buffer won't work. If they want to put a food trailer here and there's a house within 100 feet, which might be 2 houses within 100 feet, two 50-foot lot widths, they're not going to be able to put it there. So in other words, you can't plop one right next to somebody else's house because it's going to be within 100 feet if we establish that. Am I missing
No,
something
no,
you're trying to say?
You're correct.
Okay.
You're correct.
Yeah.
So to include in the buffering,
Okay, go back, may not operate within 100 feet of existing restaurants, cafes, other food establishments, or the closest residence.
okay, so let's look at our barbecue place. It's right next to some condos. It doesn't meet the criteria.
Okay.
It would have to move, if this were put in place, it would have to move after its 1-year application ran out.
So,
Is
September
that
30th.
what you're trying to achieve?
Well, that's what,
I'm confused, guys. So, I thought last meeting we were talking about just grandfathering in the 2 that we've got and not allowing more in.
I'm not sure
But now
that,
are we back
I'm not
to-
sure that that's an option.
Are we now back to?
If the council votes to grandfather them, then
we can recommend that, can't we?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll Make a motion after we're done with this.
That's what I thought,
Recommend
the
that.
whole idea. These two are going to be grandfathered no matter what the restrictions we put on future ones.
Maybe
They could
we,
stay.
maybe we start this motion with that.
So are we grandfathering and forbidding anybody else?
That's a good question there.
Because if we are, let's not even bother with this. I mean,
No,
what's the
we
point
had
of
that
doing
discussion
that?
last time, and generally, if the business presents a product that the city wants, it will survive. And we should not limit that.
Let's say, so I'm not so confused. I know you're talking about birds and this and that. But okay, let's say at the
That's
road,
okay.
you're already sticking out almost in the highway. And they want to lease to a food truck. Now, does that fall into safety of traffic? Does it fall into
Well, they can't have a food truck unless it's a special event.
trailer?
But if they want to put a food trailer there, what's to prevent it?
So,
Well, it has to be a
And it's
certain
gonna-
distance from the road, those.
Yeah,
things are already
we've got
in
other
place.
restrictions in here. We haven't got these.
Which leads to my question that started this whole thing. With property owner's principal use. So if I own a business and I tell you you can put a food trailer on my landscaping, this is telling me that I can't do that. Because you're telling me, the homeowner, that I can't allow him to do that. Because it says with property owner's use.
Okay, let's take out property owner, just add adjacent property owner's principal. use.
That's what I was trying to, okay.
Good,
this
that's-
is what I'm fearful of, Joe. Like, we love her place.
Thank you.
It looks great. It's a great service to the city. But then I'd hate to see 15 more pop up and compete against her. So we're just like opening up a whole thing of come on, come on.
frankly, I don't want to see.
If you
people.
can, you're right, that's just essentially what we're saying, come one, come all, if you can meet all this criteria.
I know it doesn't sound like it'd be too hard.
But somebody's not gonna come in here and take the chance of losing their britches unless they think they can make money.
A lot of times people always think they can make money there.
How many businesses come and go in this town thinking just that?
The number of small businesses that fail every year in America is staggering.
They think they can do it, they don't
Yes, sir.
know what it involves.
Chairman, I think Jim was on where you guys were going with grandfathering, okay? There is a use issue, and there's a restriction issue. And so in terms of the grandfathering, and Mel has had offered his, and I've heard him talk at the meetings, we've talked about it for 6 months at 7 different meetings with the city council. In terms of grandfathering, you have 2 existing permitted uses right now, businesses in the city. So if this P&Z would address the grandfathering issue and say, listen, it is a permitted use going forward, if the planning and zoning felt as though they wanted it, there's 2 issues. And the grandfathering is a legal issue of, it's a pre-existing use that was permitted by the city before new restrictions came in. So if the P&Z made a recommendation to say, yes, we want to continue that, permit that use, but however, we're going to create new restrictions.
For any future.
That's correct. So you have a pre-existing use of 2 businesses, just 2, that you said, your grandfather, or we make a recommendation to grandfather them to the city council. Now, that permitted use can continue, however, for anybody else that comes in, they're going to be aware, they're going to do a cost analysis, they're going to say, these are the new hurdles that we have to pass. They weren't in place for the other businesses, those have been grandfathered.
But that's what grandfathering is all about.
So there's a use and a restriction. So
Yeah,
now
and
we
we-
can create new restrictions for future businesses.
And I think that that's how this, if you're putting a motion together, I think that's how this motion should start.
We'll make it in one motion, you know.
Yes,
Recommend
it is the-
that grandfather under pre-existing use, the current 2 food trailers, and then permit future food trailers based on the following criteria, what he's developing.
And the reason I say it is because Mr. G's is, you said the barbecue business, or I think that's what you're referring to. It's a pre-existing use for 6 years that's been located in this area, that's permitted and lawful in this city.
We do a lot of different kind of grandfathering inside the city limits of Mexico
And
Beach.
now you're protecting all future property owners with the new restrictions.
With the new
that are in place
restrictions.
For any new potential businesses where they come.
So, yes.
I have a couple of concerns in reviewing all of the materials that were provided for us. And the first one would be, have we had any complaints from the residents adjoining Mr. G's or Scooby's?
None that I'm aware of.
Just Tanya Castro.
Okay. The other one is, you know, in reading some of the verbiage from the different cities, one is our city is a lot smaller than most of the cities that we were reviewing the materials from. The other is that I find that our city is so unique in the fact that we aren't littered with a bunch of food trucks. Although I'm all for free enterprise and I have nothing against the 2 that we have here now, some of the things that I saw that brought to mind was, you know, if we want to allow free enterprise, that's well and good, but why can't we limit it? I mean, there were a couple of the cities that actually limited it to no more than 5 food trailers, you know, for their land area. I mean, that would be something that we could look at as well.
If I could interrupt for one moment. When this all first came to the table, it was I voiced my opinion that we recommended the city council that we allow the existing ones to grandfather and however, we don't want any more. That got overridden. I think in general, we sort of took a mock, how does everybody feel about it? I personally still take that stand. Not that I'm not open to this and all of the discussion, but for being a almost 30-year resident of Mexico Beach and on the Planning and Zoning Board and my vision of Mexico Beach, which has changed dramatically I'm personally still of the opinion that we recommend to the council that we allow the 2 existing businesses and no more. It doesn't seem to be the general consensus of the board, so we're required to put something in front of the council.
Well, I would have to say, I would lean more toward your view if we were not going to limit it. I think with the size of our city, and the other questions are to ask, what are they contributing to our city? You know, as far as tax dollars, is it just more strain on our infrastructure? I mean, to add and not limit the amount that are here. So, I mean, those are some that having time to actually sit down and look at some of the different regulations and ordinances from the other cities that we were reviewing. I just feel like those are some strong concerns.
And I feel that we don't currently have any new applications. There's no one beating down the door to come put another food trailer of any sort in this town. What's the harm in saying we don't want any more? I think I used the example last meeting or the meeting before that, do you want to drive down the streets of Mexico, US 98, which is probably the only place anyone would put one that would have any chance of succeeding, and see, not that your businesses aren't attractive, but do you want to see them peppered here and there and here and there? And I'm of the opinion, no matter what you do here, they're going to squeeze them in somewhere if they choose to come compete.
And Joy, looking at the packet, I mean, you can't compare our city to the cities that we took.
Jacksonville, Pensacola, come on.
And that's what I was saying.
Yes.
And are we doing a disservice to our current restaurants and businesses who are paying taxes?
Who
have
already
brick and
struggle
mortar?
in the off-season.
Right. I mean, I think that we should consider them.
Can I make a comment? On those
Sure.
previous meetings, I agreed with your position. That was my vote, is keep the 2 we have, we don't want any more. I believe Joe, was it somebody named, either Joe or Jack said, well, but what if somebody comes in with a unique product that we don't have available now? Somebody wants to bring in a food truck with something different. Not another taco place, not another ice cream place, not a killer seafood place, not, something different. Be it Chinese food or be it something else. That if we had something on the books that would allow them possibly to come in if they could comply with those. I agree with the basic premise. I don't think we need any more of them.
But couldn't
But
a
in
person,
fairness,
let's say I wanted to open a Chinese restaurant, or I had a trailer that supplied that kind of food. Aren't there other available space that already exists that you could open?
I brought up that point too. We have vacant
You know.
shops, those shops
That's
right
right.
down by Beach Pizza.
Do we want to look like Reed Avenue with 7 businesses closed down on the street?
Well, the overhead between, leasing a building and running something out of the building versus running it out of a trailer is greatly different.
But
That's true.
why is it the responsibility of Mexico Beach to open its doors to any and everything that wants to come in? I just don't get it.
You cannot look at.
I
just
love these
the
2 businesses. I think they should have every right to stay here under a grandfather, but I'm totally not in favor of any new.
I'm not saying it's our responsibility to open our doors to anything and everything that wants to come in, but we have to determine if we really want to close our doors.
What impact would it have on our city if we don't allow any more?
If we had taken that stance, we wouldn't have the 2 businesses that we both agree are assets to the community, whether it's ice cream or barbecue.
No,
So
but we have learned from them being here.
we've learned that they're assets to the community that people appreciate
And we've learned how they look and what the traffic flow is and what it might be if more come in.
trailers, there's methods in which this P and Z can recommend it too. We're talking about restrictions on future use, and Lisa's talking about how they look. You put regulations on how they look, and how they're set up, and how they're tied into your infrastructure. If you have a brick and mortar that pays taxes, that fee, the permit fee, and I don't know what it is, 50 or $100.
Pointless.
If you're saying that there's an impact or inequality to the brick and mortar, I hate to say it, my wife's here, she'll probably kick me when I go home tonight, but you raise the application fee on an annual basis to make it commensurate with what a brick and mortar would be. So it is a higher annual fee, but now they're paying their fare to have business. You talk about business tax, you talk about, you know, the quality of life that Jack's talking about. So there's a lot of things that come into it, but if you put the regulations in place, you make them pay their way, they're contributing to the community, they're paying business tax. There's a lot of contributions, but you can make a permit fee on a fixed number of licenses that are issued a year to get that tax impact or the impact fee.
I think to cover all the bases, we're about to write a novel as big as War and Peace to cover everything, just to allow a few more possibilities of free enterprise businesses crowding into our city. We have the right to not.
Well, you're trying to treat new business different from the businesses that are existing
No,
now.
I'm just saying.
No, you are.
No,
You're
no.
saying you are not going to allow anybody else in, but you're going to allow the ones you got.
Sure.
And I'm of the opinion, if you're not allowing any more food trailers in, you should not allow the ones you've got now. That's fair. It is not fair to say that you guys can stay and you guys can't. That's not fair.
If I own a high-rise and there's 80 available apartments, when they're full, they're full.
Yeah, but
I can't.
How can you determine
I can't rent. You can determine it because it's your city. And what do you want in your city? And what do you want your city to be like?
And people the city's grandfather things in all the time. This is not unusual.
Yeah, the grandfather thing's, I think,
It's unique in Mexico.
it's settled. That part of it.
it's not fair.
There were no
Fair to
regulations. There were no regulations when these two came in. Basically, there were none.
There was.
Now, what?
We have rules they had
And
to do.
they
They had
Well,
rules.
there were a few. There were a few, okay?
They've danced all the dances they need to satisfy.
So, we, again, supposedly, we have learned from these two experiences what it takes, what it looks like, what the traffic flow is, and if the majority of us determine that, okay, we don't mind these two, but we really don't want any more of this, then we are perfectly within our
We just
rights
told a huge.
to say, we can restrict this, or we can put bigger regulations on it. It has nothing to do with taking these two out if we don't want any more in. They're here, they're working fine, but we see problems. We see the public doesn't want to look like a circus. Therefore, we're restricting more.
Didn't we just do the same thing when we fought against 33rd, 34th Street development? We said, no, we don't want that business in this town. It's too big, it's too much. It's not what we want Mexico Beach to be. They were going to have a restaurant, they were going to have a little spa, they were going to have, and the city cried out against it. What's the difference?
Oh, there's a big difference.
What?
What?
You're talking about a small unit coming in and running a business as opposed to whatever the heck that dog's going to show us.
But you're also, I mean, unless you're gonna put the limitation on it, where you're gonna limit it to 4, whatever the magic
I have
number
no
is,
problem with limiting.
then-
We don't know how many locations are available.
Yeah, your whole problem right now is you don't want it to look like something other than what we've got now.
No.
You put requirements on them, which make them look like what we've got now.
The number of available places right now is the number of businesses who will give permission for them to park it on their lot.
There are currently 52 or 58 storefronts in Mexico Beach.
There's about 5 that'll say yes. We've had people try all the time to get them here, and the business, they can't find a business that'll let them.
So we have potentially 52 to 58 locations that they can go just on commercial
Just commercial parking.
Just commercial, this is not tourist commercial, I don't think.
Now, do all
I'm talking
52,
store
58 of
parking.
those have room for food truck?
Trailers.
Yes.
A food trailer? You're saying we'd have that many businesses, but I doubt.
It depends
they
what
can all fit
restrictions
on
are
there.
put on them.
Yeah.
That's the trick.
It sounds to me like we need to go back to the drawing board and take another vote and see whether or not we want to allow them.
I would basically say somebody make a motion, see if it passes, we can quit talking about it.
I would, okay, if someone would like to entertain this possibility, we make a motion that we recommend to the council that we allow the grandfathering and future existence of our 2 existing food trailers, but it's the board's recommendation that we don't allow any additional food trailers in our in our city limits. If someone wants to make that kind of a motion, or however they'd like to word it, we could find out how the board feels about that. If not, we need to continue to discuss what restrictions we want to put on food trailers inside our city limits.
Are you making that motion?
I don't make motions.
You don't make motions.
I actually agree with Denise that if the number were limited to another 2 or another 3, that's reasonable.
Well, that's not
But what are
we're
you
talking
doing
about.
to the other 5 people that might want them? If you're going to allow 2, 3, or 5, what's the difference between not allowing any more?
We based it on the size of our city.
That's what the other cities have done. Somebody make a motion, let's get
Okay,
this. finish this.
I will make a motion that we recommend city council that the 2 existing Shootings and Mr. G's be grandfathered in and allowed to remain, and that we do not allow any further food trailers in Mexico Beach, I guess.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
All in favor? Let's take a roll call, please, Adrian.
Let me finish the motion. I'm going to read it back. Motion by Mr. Coakley and second by Ms. Kidder to recommend to the City Council grandfathering the 2 existing food trailers, Mr. G's and Shoeby's, and that the city prohibit any further trailers allowed to be in the city. Mr. Coakley,
Yes.
Ms. Kidder,
Yes.
Chair Teal,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
No.
Mr. Kerrigan.
No.
Motion passes 3-2.
If I could add one more question. I'm going to make a common sense comment. What if there is a desire of Mr. G to sell to someone else? Does that then become null and void?
If he occupies the same space, the same...
If it can be the same barbecue place as ever, but he sells to somebody else?
My opinion would be that they would not be allowed to move in.
Usually in grandfather's day.
Yeah, grandfather usually stays with the original
So
business.
do we want an addendum to the motion that when the current owners of those 2 businesses, that we recommend their
So the grandfather
ceases
non-transferable
if
to
the
another
business
owner?
changes hands? Do we have to do something formal to add that to?
It would be nice if he did to clarify it.
Okay, so would someone like to try to phrase that, and we'll make an amendment or addendum to the current motion?
Do we need to say that when that owner leaves, what if they want to sell it, pass it down in the family or something, and it's going to continue being the same exact business, selling the exact same product, which we find to be of benefit to Mexico Beach right now, having Mr. G's and having Shoeby's with the products that they do sell.
But maybe the business won't be run the same.
That's true.
about existing proprietor, current proprietor.
I think that you're probably right.
Let's
Probably
ask the
needs to
current,
stick
let's
with
ask the current business owners. Would, how do I phrase this? Are your intentions to, at some point, attempt to sell your business or turn it over to a family member? Or would you have a problem if, when either of you want to make a transition in the business, that you not be allowed to, that it ceases to exist?
I don't think that would be right.
But
I
that's all.
think if it's in the business, stays in the same name, and it's a family member, I don't think it would be right to not be able to do it.
Okay, and how does the Scoobies people feel?
I don't have any plans to sell it or give it to someone else. If it stays with me, it stays with me.
If Kelly's not doing it, it wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I'm not.
Or else I'll sleep on the couch tonight, Chairman, you're gonna get me in a lot of trouble.
So we've kind of got a split decision there that we have to consider that, and that's a very good question. To me, if the business is grandfathered, it meets the criteria that they're now under, that satisfied everyone, I don't know that it matters if his son comes in and runs the business, or even if he sold it to someone else. If they didn't do anything to the physical plant that changed anything that would create an issue, try to build a structure out in front of it, or they wouldn't be permitted to. I think if we're going to allow them to exist, we're allowing the structures as they sit, and it doesn't really matter who's standing behind the window handing or making the product. If he chooses to sell it to someone else and the food's bad and it gets shut down, whoop, now we only got one in town.
Might not be what you want in town, might not be a good addition then, so I think it should sunset. I mean, everything else sunsets on a grandfather clause.
Okay, everything else,
Everything we have right now, correct? Once you sell it, transfer anything, it's over.
That's normal,
okay.
but if that's not the intent, we need to say
That's
so.
what, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna either have to say that the sunsets, or we'll have to put into this amendment.
You might as well keep it the same as everything else in town. I mean, everything else.
If it sunsets, then we don't need to stipulate.
Right, we don't have to say.
So the motion the way it is good.
Well, it's not in the motion the way it is now. We need to add it.
Oh,
Yeah,
we
it
need to
says
add to the
nothing.
motion.
So there's an interim decision here to make before we complete this motion, which we've already passed with a 3-2, is the long-term life of these businesses. Do we sunset them? Or do we allow them to pass it on to a family member, sell it to a brand new person?
Well, the current grandfathering, whatever his grandfather makes the beach right now, is anything written saying that that grandfathering expires if the business, if the owner dies or sells the business? Or is that just a given?
That's just a given. But then what happens if Mr. G's takes a turn and sells it to somebody who sells Chinese food or something?
Well, that would be my concern, is they stop selling the same product, change to another product, because one of the reasons we're grandfathering them is because of what they're selling now.
But they're all still going to be continued to apply annually for their license, correct?
Right.
and I guess playing devil's advocate for the residents nearby, I wonder if when Mr. G's went in, you know, they had in their mind that this was not going to be a lifelong situation where there was going to be a permanent food trailer beside their residence. And that maybe thinking that it was going to be more of a fly-by-night thing, they were more willing to tolerate it or accept it. But then if they had the information that this was going to be a permanent fixture, you know,
They may have
and there was
been
going to be a
opposed to it.
permanent situation where parking might become a problem for them, you know, getting into their homes and things, they might be opposed to it. So Scooby's not so much because they're in a parking lot. They don't have residents next door to them. They're not impacting the quality of people's daily lives. So those would be my concerns.
So do we not address the issue and let it go to sunset?
I think they're saying we need to put a clause in there.
If it's going to be sunsetted, it needs to be
We
in
need
the
to
motion.
put it-
So would you like to amend your motion to include,
Just make a new one.
do a new one?
I have it written.
Okay,
We'd like to hear you.
what is my motion?
I like creating these from discussion. It's motion by whoever, that the grandfathering of trailers sunsets with any sale or transfer of the business.
Someone like to re-speak that motion?
I'll make a motion as you just stated.
And do I have a second?
I second.
And a roll call on a vote?
Mr. Coakley?
Yes.
Ms. Kidder?
Yes.
Chair Teal?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
No.
And Mr. Kerrigan?
No.
Motion passes 3-2. And we move on to our last item, which usually falls in our city administrator's lap of other various and sundry items.
I'll be easy on you this month. I got nothing.
Then do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
And do I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're out of here.
Let me say thank you to the five of you or to all of you working up there. It's nice to see a discussion that was well prepared and well discussed and well documented. So thank you.
We appreciate it.